Hello. I think it might be important to walk through assignment 13 with you. I know at this point in time, things are a little different. And again, trying to understand exactly how to break down a program and do it correctly is new to many people. And so the best thing to do is practice it, try it. If you get stuck on it, then listen to this video and make sure you're following along and learn from it so you can apply it to the next thing and so on, okay? Once again, you need to understand how to break down a program into modules. There is no getting around that if you're going to become a software developer. Also, this is also a time usually in the course where people start getting away from the process in which we talked about early in the course, which is designing your code. You don't get away from that at all. You still design your code. Matter of fact, to me, it's the easiest way of really doing this problem. If you dove right into the program, there's no doubt things get a little bit difficult. I get asked by students every once in a while on this problem, where do I start? What do I do? Well, you design your program. And if you do it the way I taught you to do it, it's pretty easy then to figure out how to actually break down your program into modules. So let's do that together real fast. Okay, so this particular problem, a little bit different, a little bit confusing, maybe for some. We're basically taking a business trip. So this would be a person working for, let's say, I don't know, Procter & Gamble, taking a business trip. This person's either a manager or a non-manager. They're taking a certain amount of days on this trip, and they accumulated a certain amount of cost already for the trip. So they plan their own trip, or whomever helped them with their planning of the trip, and they basically came up with their air travel costs, their total lodging costs, and their total food costs. So this is basically the cost after the trip has concluded. What this program is supposed to do is you put those costs in, and it determines what costs are covered by the company and what costs are covered by the employee. Covered by the company would be reimbursed, and covered by the employee would be what's responsible. Okay? There is a couple different ways of tackling this problem, there's no doubt. I'm going to show you one way. As a matter of fact, I might show you a little bit of an alternate way that I imagine a lot of you actually approached it. I'm just doing that as another way. I'm not saying yours is wrong at all. I'm not sure there's really a wrong answer to this unless your code got really kind of crazy. But you might be shocked on how easy this program is once we kind of get into it. So that's our goal. We had our inputs of number of days, air travel costs, travel lodging costs, and the travel food costs. We had our outputs, which, if you read this pretty easily, travel costs, total travel costs, total reimbursed by company, and a total employee responsible amount. So again, based upon how much the employee spent on each one of these things, we determine that amount. We determine what the company's going to pay for and what the employee has to pay for. One thing in there that's really important in this particular problem is this word each right here. I'm not sure you caught this or not when you wrote this program, but it's just not as easy as saying, okay, they spent all this money, but they get all this money. No. That's a per diem for each of these categories. And so they could have spent less money on lodging and more money on food, meaning maybe they spent $100 a day on food and $100 a day on lodging. The extra lodging that you get here was not supposed to be used for food. So if you were over on food, you owed money back to the company. It was per thing here. Does that make sense? I'm not sure you caught that or not. And if you didn't, I don't want you to scream or have a heart attack or anything, but that's how this is supposed to be resolved. It's for each piece here, or each type of cost, okay, is what your per diem was. So once again, if you spent $100 a day for lodging and say you went on 2 days, you saved the company $50. But then if you had 2 days, you spent 100 days on food, you're responsible for the extra $50. Does that make sense? So that'd be the $100 for $200. You get $150. You're responsible for those extra $50. Does that make sense? So yeah, it's kind of like not fair in this case, but that was the key part of this, that word each right there. All right. So with that said, if you didn't do it that way, like I said, that's okay. In some ways, it's wrong, but it's okay. But let's go ahead and learn how to do this. Well, once again, where do I start? Well, I always start with what's my inputs and what's my outputs. That's where I start, okay? And if you're not starting there still, or you're just diving in and you're not thinking this through, you're wasting time, probably a ton of time. Always design your programs, people. It's going to save you time. I promise you. It'll save you a lot of time just to think this through before you dive into the program. I saw someone the other day trying to do this, and they came to me and they said, I've been working on this problem for 10 hours. This problem should not take you 10 hours. This problem should take you an hour or so at best. And so, with that said, if you just follow the process, I promise you, you'll be shocked. Okay? Well, in this case here, I'm going to get my days, air, and lodging. Okay, and let's go down here and look at how I actually resolve this. So how I resolve this is this. I get my air, lodging. My total travel cost is the first thing I'm going to do. I'm going to work on total responsible versus total reimbursed. It's kind of interesting in this case. You could go either way here. So I'm just showing you an alternate way of I did it. I went after the responsible for the reimburse. And again, it's really just changing your if conditions. It's not that big a deal which way you go. So I thought, I'm going to show you responsible, go for responsible second, and then figure out the final what's reimbursed at the end. Again, I imagine most of you went the other way around, and that's fine. Okay. So how did I do that? Well, I asked if it's a manager, I'm going to say if air is greater than 500, because managers, let's go back up here. Managers get $500, $125 a day, and $75 a day for food, where non-managers get 400, 150. So really the logic is not that hard, where we sit back and we have total responsible. If it's greater than 500, my total responsible is going to be air minus 500, air being my input. So if I spend $600 on air, I get $500 from the company. My responsibility is $100 of that. Make sense? If I didn't spend over $500, well, I basically don't have anything that's responsible. I don't have anything I owe back. So if I spent $400, total responsible in this case would be zero. And so since when we declare our variables, it's usually zero. And when we declare them, always zero when we declare a numeric variable. I can just do it this way. Lodging, I said, is it greater than 125 times the days that I have? Well, so if I'm there for 2 days, I get $250 for lodging. If I spent more than that, my input is more than that, I'm going to add that to the total responsible. So I get $250 if I did 2 days here. And then with that said, I have, if I spent $300, my total responsible would increase by $50. If I spent $200, once again, I either use it or lose it. I don't get it anywhere else. I just lose it. And so my total responsible doesn't change. And that'd be the same thing for food. Finally, I have an else statement here. So if I'm not manager, I'm a non-manager, and I did the exact same thing with the criteria for non-managers, meaning the per diem, $400, $100 for lodging, and $50 for this. Once I figured out my total responsible, all I had to do was my total reimbursed then equals total travel costs minus total responsible. What do you think? Is this what you guys came up with? Pretty simple, right? It's not really a long program. It's simplistically this. If you dove into this module program and didn't do it this way, I have a feeling you spent a lot of time on this. Okay, but if you came in and just, as I told you to do originally, solve the problem like you originally would have done. And then what we're going to do is take this design and figure out, where do things belong? Where do things belong? Okay, does that make sense? All right, cool. So that's my piece there. So the next thing I would probably do, and I could have done this before or after I got into my design. I probably would have maybe done it a little bit before, but for the most part, this is my structure chart. And so my structure chart allows me to think through, how am I going to modularize my program? I'm going to have a main routine, get and validate input, obviously. I don't know why I had that one there still. I'm going to get rid of that. That was just to show you guys a long time ago, chapter 1, chapter 2. Obviously, I have some inputs, in this case here, days, airfare, food, and lodging. Got it? okay? In this case, and then I'll have my calculate travel expenses, okay? And display, I'm going to display it. All right, the three main ones all apply. For my calculate travel expenses, I'm going to calculate total cost. So I got to ask, again, where do I start? How do I break it down? Well, I would start with the outputs. Start with the outputs and try to understand, once again, what each output's doing. And so my main things here probably are, I'm not going to say all the time, but probably are what my outputs are going to be. And so in this case, I have travel costs. Remember, I go back to let's get back to my design here. And my outputs are travel costs, responsible, and reimburse, okay? So with that said, that's what I'm going to start with. I'm going to calculate my travel costs. And then I started thinking about this. Well, I'm going to calculate my responsible. Well, how am I going to do that? Well, with a way, I got to calculate manager or non-management. And they're two different things. So I did separate those. All right. That I just had to think that through. And I'm not saying this is the only way of doing this, but at some point you had to ask the question. And so I probably would have separated those two things. And then finally, calculate reimbursement. So at a minimum, you should have had total cost, reimbursement or responsible, and then responsible or reimbursement on this line right here. And then you had to start thinking about, well, how am I going to get these things? I had to get either responsible or reimbursement, one of the two, before I figured out my final piece, right? And I went with responsible. I need to calculate the air responsible, lodging responsible, and food responsible. With that said, I have something in here. You're probably looking at this going, what in the heck is this line doing right here? Well, as an old programmer, somebody who's been doing this for a long, long time, again, one of the benefits, right, of modularization is reuse. I'm not sure I expected you guys to do this at all. Matter of fact, I had no expectation of you doing this at all. But I'm going to show you my way. I started discovering that these three right here do almost the exact same, they do the exact same thing for either manager or non-manager. The only difference is what the per diem is for those two. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to write my procedures dynamically, if you will, to allow for flexibility, meaning I'm going to pass the per diem from either here or here for each one, and then use that per diem in each one of these procedures. I don't know if that makes sense to you or not. Maybe when you see the program, you'll go, oh, that's what he's doing. Okay? And so this comes with practice. So if you duplicated these, maybe you might have calculate air responsible for manager, calculate lodging responsible for manager. I get it. And I don't, as a matter of fact, that's great. I will pat you on the back and say that's great. But later on, what you want to start looking at is how can we reuse stuff? And sometimes you can do it very simply just by another input that you may not have considered before. So keep that thought in there. And again, another approach here, okay? So once again, where do you start at? Look at your outputs, identify your outputs, and have a box, high-level box for each one. And then consider each output and what the steps are to get to that output. If there's multiple steps, that's when you need to, and there are different purposes in these steps, break it down. In this case, calculating air responsible is totally different than calculating lodging responsible, and that's how I would break it down. I hope that helps if you got stuck on that a little bit, okay? All right, cool. So what do I do after I have this? Well, the next thing I do is I'm going to come back and I'm going to look at my design again. Let's see, I have some different versions of this design up here. And I'm going to come in here and I'm going to do a couple things before we dive into breaking it down. The next pieces we're supposed to do is once we have it all done, we will look at our variables. Well, in this case here, my day would be local, 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 and all my outputs would be local too. My days would be short. That's based upon what we talked about last week with data types. I don't think I'm going to go over 34,000 days, so I could use short there. If you use integer, not that big a deal. I just want to make sure you understand the concept of short. Double for the rest of them. As you see, I haven't really changed how I design my program. Even though we're modularizing, I have not changed it. Matter of fact, You shouldn't think about changing it at all. This is how you do it. Do it the way we always been doing and then break it down into modules. I think that's the easiest way of learning this. The other thing I wanted to do was make sure we tested it, and I created a test plan. Once again, how do you know this thing works? Well, you still got to test it. So test plans don't go away. And so I'm going to use this original design here to create my test plans. As you see, identified each one of my paths, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and created multiple test plans. I'm a manager, 4 days, 400, lodging is 400, food is 400. My total cost is 1,200. Total responsible is 100 because I went over in food, and I think that's what I did. Yep. And my reimbursement's 1,100. Here's the pass, and so on. And I ended up with 4 test plans, really 2 each for either manager or non-manager. And look at that. I'm done with my design. If you did not do this, I highly recommend you look at this document. I have this posted, and make sure you understand and get back to this. If you struggled with your program, I highly recommend you go back and start here again, and then walk back into your program and get that thing working. This might be one you really want to get working, okay? I know I'm going to give you the solution, but get it working and make sure you understand. It's not going away. The next several weeks, you're still going to be modularizing programs, okay? All right. All right, isn't that pretty cool? The last thing I would do with my design, and again, this didn't take me very long coming up with the test plans, but now I know it, and I walked through it, and I said, yeah, my logic works. That's a good thing to know before I dive into this program and I start doing all these modules, that my logic works. I know what I should expect out of this program. So with that said, I can now write my program, and if I get these answers, I know it works. If I don't get these answers, I know it doesn't work. And there's some logic, it might have a programming problem, not a logical problem. Make sense? All right. My last version of this then is to take how I'm going to break this down and really, I will say sectionalize it, or let's see, whoops, I got to get back to the one here. Here it is here, and put these things into, all right, I have 3 of them up here, and obviously I'm wrong, into those categories. Well, here's calculate total cost. So what I did is I took my document, and now that I got through everything else, I said, where am I going to put this code at? Well, calculate total cost is this right here. What am I going to do in that? Well, I'm going to calculate add them all up. My calculate management's responsible piece, okay, which is this one right here, I'm going to do 3 things. I'm going to, here we go, calculate air responsible, calculate lodging responsible, calculate food responsible. And this is calculate non-management, calculate air responsible, calculate lodging responsible, calculate food responsible, and then calculate reimbursement is my last thing. This is how I'm going to split this thing up. As I told you before, because these are so similar, and the only difference is that piece of input right here, not really an input, what do you want to say? That constant in a way, that those values, I can write this kind of, I don't want to say ingeniously, but I can write it dynamically to accept that value, and then I only have to write that logic one time. And I'll show you how I do that once I get into the program. But I hope this helps you a little bit when you sit back and say, where do I start? Start with the basics of what you know, write the code, and then split it up and say where you're going to put these things at. And this is exactly how I'm going to write my programs. This is what this logic's going to be in as I go through it. Okay? Right now, I'm not worrying about by ref. I'm not worried about by val. I'm not worried about any of those things. I'm just designing my program. Okay? I worry about those things when I get to the program language. Okay? And start realizing how I need to pass data around. Does that make sense? All right, and I have my test cases there. Okay, so take a good hard look at this. Okay, and make sure you understand what I did and how I did it, and the process of going through it step by step by step. This did not take me very long to do. I'm going to tell you, probably 20 minutes to design this program or so. All right. I know I've been doing it a long time. It might take you a little bit longer than that, but if you just allow yourself to think through it before you dive into the code, I promise you, you're going to save yourself hours. because now I know what I want my code to look like. So let's go look at my code then. So in this case here, I already identified all my inputs, and here's my outputs. I do not have any public, I have no class ones because I said I wasn't going to. I got my Boolean validated, which is new. That was not my design, but this is, I'm going to put this in here to control everything. I'm going to get and validate days, air, food, lodging, and validated. Okay. If validated, I'm going to calculate travel expenses, and I'm going to pass down my inputs and my outputs to be filled up. Okay. And finally, I'm going to display them. Here's my validation. It should look very similar. Try parse should not be part of your problems or part of your validation. Hopefully you understand that now. Okay. And then I get down to calculate travel expenses. Here's where I ask the question. So I said calculate travel costs. Once again, if I look at my hierarchy chart, calculate travel expenses. It's because I don't call calculate total cost. See that right there? So this one is going to call this one. This is how I have it set up. So calculate travel expenses is going to call calculate total cost. It comes down here by val, by val, by val, calculate, let's see. And I'm sorry, where am I at here? Calculate total cost right here. And it's by val, all those three, and my total cost would be by ref because I'm changing that. Does that make sense? So that's my total cost. So these are all by val because they're all inputs. I'm not changing them, I'm just reading them. And this one was by, the last one, the DBL total cost is by ref. Once again, make sure you put by val and the data type in there, okay? So I see some people not doing that. Do it. I know there's a default of by val. I'd rather you stick it in there so you know exactly what you're doing, okay? I know if you hover over this in 2019, it says by val keyword is unnecessary. Don't remove it. Right now, I want you to put it in there because I want to make sure you understand it, okay? So put everything in there right now. Once you have this down, feel free to not put it in there in the future, okay? But for the rest of this course, put it in there. All right? The next thing I ask is, if manager, I'm going to do this, and if non-manager, I'm going to go to this one. So if you kind of look at my thing, this one calls either this one or this one. So I have a piece of logic sitting right here, and calculate travel expenses has asked me which one do I call. Does that make sense? Pretty easy. And then finally, it's going to call calculate reimbursement. So we get back, and there it is right there. So if I'm a manager, I'm calling this one, and if I'm non-manager, I'm calling this one. I'm passing down the air, food, lodging, and the responsible would be the bucket I'm going to fill up. That's how I'm going to receive this by ref. As you see here, I have one for manager and non-manager. And look at the difference here. So I sat back and I said on my chart, calculate management responsible is going to call this, this, and this. Calculate non-management responsible is going to call this, this, and this. Make sense? That little line there says I'm going to reuse those modules. That's what that line tells me. I'm reusing them. Okay. So I put this line right here I found in here. I made it white, and it's telling me those are reused modules. Now look what I did here. I'm calling calculate air responsible, food responsible, lodging responsible. I'm same thing for non-management. But what I'm passing down to make this work, in this case, what I'm passing down is the actual values of the per diems or the amount of the airfare that you're allowed. And then down here, I do that. What do you think? Like I said, I'm not sure I expected you to do that. If anybody did, wow. If you didn't, no big deal. But hopefully by looking at this, you're learning a little bit. And as you see then, all I do is exactly what I have in my logic. This logic right here is no different. All it is the same logic I have right here. Oh, you see that? I'm asking the same questions just in VB. Pretty cool. All right, everything was by val for my input. The only difference was my reimbursement I'm changing. In this case, whoops, responsible I'm changing. Yeah, I'm sorry, right here. Okay, and there is lodging. Only thing I'm changing is responsible. So that is, as you see, yeah, that is the that's what I'm changing there. That's why it's by ref. Okay, My final thing I said I was going to call from my calculated expenses was the total travel reimbursement. So I take my costs, my responsible, and I'm going to come up with my reimbursement. All right. And then finally, I deal with my travel expenses and I display them. And I have two-string. I had one person the other day say, I'm getting some errors on two-string. And the problem was I didn't put BiVal or the data type here. Make sure they're there to make those work. Make sure it's complete. And that's my program, right? And I'm going to go ahead and run this to show you how it works. And let's see. There you go. We'll pull this down a little bit. I don't know why it does that, to tell you the truth. And what I would use is, once again, my, I'm going to pull one of these in here, my test cases. And so in doing so, here we go, test case 1. I'm going to be a manager, so I'm going to do 4 days. And my air is going to be 400. My lodging is going to be 400. And my food's going to be 400. I'm a manager. And as you see, $1,200, $100 responsible, $1,100 reimbursed. So in that case, I did it perfectly, or at least that test case works. We'll go ahead and put $600 here now for lodging. And let's see, I'm sorry, air, food is $200 to test the other path, and this would be $600. This is my expected results. Let's see how I do. 1,400. Oh, I have something different here. So 1,400, 1,300. I got a problem. And so with that, I need to go in and either look and see if my test case is right or I'm wrong in this case. I think, let's see, food, if I look at this, lodging is over by 100. Yeah, no. My test case is wrong. That's what it is. My lodging's over by 100. My food is under. And so with what? But my air is over. Let's see. So my air is over by 100. My lodging is over 4 days at 125. It's $500. And so it should be 200. I got a little problem there I need to resolve. Okay, and I will go through and look at that one more time before we go there. Either I'll post the test cases and so on. See, this is why you test it. And go from there. The first one, non-manager. Let's go here. 4 days, $400, and let's see, $400 here, and then food was $400. Let's see how I did on this one. Submit, and I should have. Let's see my expected results: 1,200, 200, 1,000. Okay, that's good. And it's not. Let's go this other way again. Let's see how I do on air. 600. Something's wrong here, I think, in this one. My lodge, maybe I know what I did. Maybe I put this in backwards. I see I had food right here. 200. And I hit submit. And that one's good. Okay, so there's 200 responsible. Let me go back up here real fast. I just may have just put this in incorrectly. So maybe I shouldn't be blushing like I am right now, going, oh my God. So 600, 200, let's do manager again. Maybe I had that in backwards. No, I still got a problem there. I got either on my test case is wrong, because I'm expecting 400 responsible and 800 here. So I need to go check that out and get that fixed, and I will do so and make sure I have the right either my expected results are wrong or my logic is wrong. So I need to go look at that. And that's how you do this. Maybe it's a good thing something's wrong. That's why you test. And that's why I need to go look at this to make sure it's right. Because right now I'm getting a different answer. This is cool. My total reimbursed is not. I expected this to be 100. I'm trying to think. And so this would be management, right? Manager. So 500, 100 there, and I would think 100 there. I think I should have 200. I messed this up somehow. I'll fix that up and figure out what's wrong and go from there. All right. With that, at least you get a decent understanding of how all this works and how you should go about writing your own program. Okay. And I hope this helps.